Hey, I'm Toussaint Morrison. Thank you so much for tuning into the Social Science Club. If you find this video of value, hit subscribe or like. Okay, we're gonna get into it. We're gonna talk about going back to the place you're from or the place that you experienced trauma to understand where you're at. And I believe this doesn't necessarily have to be geographic, but it can be in meditation, emotionally going to that place. It can be in a lot of different ways. For me, this happened in a geographic way. So I went back to New Orleans, where I was born, in April. Everything just lined up perfectly, and I had all the time in the world to go. Was going to be at a wedding in Atlanta a few days before. Great, let's go to New Orleans. So I was in Atlanta, some Airbnbs all over the place. I mean, I kind of flubbed it up because I got the Airbnbs last minute, and I think it was in Cabbagetown. I think it's called Cabbagetown. And then I went to an old rundown coffee house. And so I was sleeping in like a resource space or an inventory space, you know, where they kept the coffee or something. There was a bed in the closet, so it was there. And, but I slept there. And I mean, I say that to follow into what to what happened next. And I had no problems sleeping in those places. I mean, they were odd. It's fine. It's great. Went to New Orleans, and I have a fair amount of things I experienced as a kid from 0 to 4 in New Orleans. I'll get into that in another video, but I hope this is of service to you, so we understand that what happens to us as children, it don't leave you. It really doesn't at all, in no shape or form. Whether we know it, think it, believe it, feel it or not, it's there. And I'm in New Orleans, and I immediately pull up and meet up with my father, sister, nephews, brother-in-law. It's all good. And I had an Airbnb set up in a certain side of town, and my father was like, "What? Got an Airbnb over there?" And I was like, yeah. He's like, "Well, you better have some protection with you." He's talking about a gun. And I was like, "What?" So I called a few friends in New Orleans, and they're like, "Yeah, you probably don't want to stay there." And I was like, "Shit." So I call a friend, and I stay at their house. And it's a couple, you know, they got a bedroom, I'm in the living room, and you know, everything's fine. I go to sleep, and I then all of a sudden wake up, and I'm standing in a doorway. And I'm looking out on a particular street in Magazine. I just gave away the street. I'm looking out on Magazine Street. I didn't want to give away the locale. These people have moved, so it doesn't matter. But I'm standing in a doorway, just like looking out a magazine. In my drawers, in my t-shirt, just looking out. And I remember coming to, because one of my friends that was sleeping in the bedroom was like, "Hey, Toussaint, what you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah. And I sleepwalk to bed and fall asleep. Wake up the next morning, and I'm like, man, I had the strangest dream. I was standing in a damn doorway looking out at the bar across the street. What was that? Was that real?" My friend's like, "Yeah, you did that." And I was like, "No." And something was going on. Like, I started to feel things that just throughout the day without even thinking about them. And it was hitting me hard. And it was hitting me hardest in my sleep, or right before I went to sleep. And I could not shake what the hell was going on. So moving forward, I went to another Airbnb, and it's in New Orleans, and I got up in the middle of the night, and I was just standing looking out the window, and I woke up as I was looking out of the window. And I'm like, crap, I'm doing it again. And so I then I had to sit down and make a phone call to a family member and some friends and figure out what's going on. And what I deduced to what was going on is that I haven't had this issue really anywhere. But all of a sudden I'm in New Orleans, and you know, well, what the hell? He's getting up and looking out of the window. My childhood, there are some like extreme events that happened in New Orleans for me as a child. And that those things were somehow looping. Like all of a sudden, I'd be walking down the street and then boom, like I'd have a memory and be like, whoa, 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 where'd that come from? It's like the ghost, you know, from Ghostbusters, just like whoosh, passing right through you. And you're like, whoa, what was that? And I had to go back to the place where I was from to figure out where the F I'm at right now emotionally in my life. And I'm still figuring it out. I mean, that was in April of 2022. It is October of 2022, and I'm still checking in, talking to my therapist, like writing things down, journaling a lot, to figure out what that was. And a lot of that was unprocessed trauma, is the long story short. And that's okay. You know, that I believe we all have a lot of unprocessed trauma. And I ended up having to sort through a lot of that. And I'm still sorting through it because trauma responses are real. And sometimes things are happening that, sometimes nothing is happening. Everything is fine. And you're reacting to something from when you were 3. Like, that's the crazy part. And the way that I phrase it is when a quarterback gets like viciously hit or sacked in the pocket. And then the next play, you'll see said quarterback, you know, shucking and jiving and ducking when nobody's there. And they call it seeing ghosts. And that's a very microscopic, small example. But on a scale of a lifetime, something may have happened to you in your childhood. And all of a sudden you're like, 30 years later, you're like, yes, I'm responding to that same thing. It's not there. And it's not happening. It's not real. In your head it is, because it's a trauma response. And so, I know the reasoning why I was waking up in the middle of the night. Won't go into it in this video. Definitely had a lot to do with my parents at the time and just me as a kid. And they're just memories I have as early as 2 years old. But the thing that I encourage y'all to do is to get into where do you have to go to figure where you're at now? Where do you have to process to see who you are now? What does all that mean to you? And I think that can do massive amounts of help and support for the person you're being right now. And one thing that we do, I'll wrap this up, is what kind of hug would you give, you know, yourself as a kid or an adolescent? Like, what would you say to them? How would you support them? What would you say? And we sit down and meditate on that. That can get pretty deep. And it is, there's a lot going on there. And I think, the child version of myself probably just haven't processed a whole lot of things that happened there. And that's okay, because going back to New Orleans, and I'll be going back sooner than later, it'll all be happening again. So we'll relive the whole situation again. But I think it's incumbent upon everybody to at least check in with where do they have to go to figure out where they're at, and what do you have to process to figure out who you are. And I hope this video was of help to you. So yeah, if you found it of value, hit subscribe or like. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.